Well, good morning and welcome to this 2014 Triumph Street Triple 675R. And in this video we're going to find out if older bikes can be better than newer bikes. Because as some of you who follow me on Instagram might know, I actually used to own one of the newer generation Street Triple 765 RS's, which I actually sold after only 2 months of ownership. Reason being is, I found that bike's performance so out of line with what I as a rider am capable of and the risks I'm willing to take on the street. Which brings me to the reason we're riding this today. As I was selling my own bike, I actually got the chance to ride one of these and enjoyed it more than my own. The 765 always felt very aggressive, both in its engine, chassis and ergonomics, and its older generation just felt a little bit more flexible and a little bit more friendly. So, did I buy the wrong bike? Can older bikes be better than newer bikes? Let's go for a ride and find out. So what is this 675 generation like to ride? First thing, the engine. It's a lot more flexible than the newer generation. You can definitely tell that on the RS, Triumph put in a different camshaft, which made the power delivery quite a bit more peaky. And the spread of power on this bike is a lot more flexible, which makes it easier to live with and a lot more enjoyable to ride on the street to me. Second thing is the seating position. On my bike, I always felt locked into position forward quite a bit because the back of the seat was quite high, and that got really annoying after a while because you feel like there's no freedom to move around. I'm happy to say that on this bike, the seat is quite a bit roomier, quite a bit flatter, and more comfortable in general. So another tick for the livability. Third thing is the exhaust noise. My bike was a Euro 5 bike. Although that had the factory-equipped Aero exhaust, which this bike also has, by the way, I only could hear the induction noise. And while the induction noise on that bike is quite fantastic, the exhaust noise on this bike is just amazing. Another thing I really appreciate about this bike, as small as it may sound, is the analog tachometer. Another hobby of mine is I'm into watches. And although this isn't quite a Swiss watch, you can definitely tell Triumph put a lot of thought and effort into the design of this tachometer because it looks absolutely beautiful. And it's very satisfying to watch the analog tachometer climb and drop when you're riding. Lastly are the brakes. Although my own 765 RS had the Brembo M50s, I believe, and the RCS Master Cylinder, which is like top of the line superbike stuff, the brakes on this bike actually feel sharper and better. Although this only has, I say, Nissin calipers, I reckon you could one finger stop this bike no problem. And the interesting thing is, when I was selling my 765, the guy who was test riding it also owned one of these, and he said his brakes felt better than mine. And at first I was like, okay, sure man, you're just trying to haggle. But now that I'm riding this, I can actually sort of tell where he's coming from. Now let's drop the comparison and just talk about how this bike rides in general. It's amazing to me this bike is 10 years old now. Like I said, this is a 2014 model and you couldn't tell. The chassis still holds up, it feels really light, the suspension is still amazing, gives you a lot of confidence, it's really easy to flick around. As I mentioned before, the brakes are still really strong, and technology-wise, I don't really feel the need for traction control, rider modes, stuff like that on a bike like this. It has ABS, it has the quick shifter up, and I think, to be honest, that's about all you need. So, yeah, especially around the price point, I think this is a really amazing deal. So, let me pull over and talk about it a little bit more. Right, so I just figured I'd stop, drink some water, eat a snack, and talk about the values these bikes represent right now. This very bike actually belongs to a friend of mine. He was on a quest to find the best middleweight sports bikes on which he could commute, go to the track, go on holidays abroad. And his budget was around 6.5 grand. And for that budget you can look at MT-09s, the first generation, which has really wobbly suspension and stretchy throttle. You can look at a Kawasaki Z800, but that's literally 40 kilos heavier than this bike. You can look at old MV Agusta Brutales, but
knowing the Italian brands, the reliability might not be as good as something like the Triumph or the Yamaha. So I think the Triumph is in a really interesting position where if you look at the competition, there's not much that they do better than this bike. Of course, the MT-09 might be a bit more of a hooligan, but as an all-rounder, I think this might be the best bike you can buy for under 7,000 euros. Of course, you can always look at things like an MT-07 or an SV650. Those are also great all-round bikes, but I don't think they're gonna have the performance that this thing has on track. So yeah, gonna enjoy this water, eat this snack, and then hop on again, go for a ride.
So, is this the bike I should have bought instead of my 765 RS? Well, probably. I mean, I'm still gonna argue that this is probably a better bike for most people. It's more usable, it's more flexible, it's more comfortable. And those are all really important parts for a street bike to me. That being said, I still don't think this is the bike for me. Although this is a nice step in the right direction compared to the RS, it's still not the kind of characteristics in a bike I'm looking for at the moment. You can still tell it's quite a serious motorcycle, and that's just not what I'm after these days. I prefer to be a little bit more comfortable still, have a little bit more of a chilled out engine. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think if you're looking for this kind of thing, like my friend, the owner is, I think this is a spectacular bike. But yeah, as I said, I don't think it's for me. So let me pull over and we'll wrap this video up.
So it's been a really interesting experience riding this 675 Art Generation Street Triple over the last few days. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I fully expected to ride this bike and feel like I regret buying the 765 RS instead of this. And while I do feel like this bike would have suited me a lot better and would have matched the criteria I had a lot better than the 765 RS, I still feel like I'm running into the same issues with this bike as I had with the RS. So I want to say a huge thank you to the owner of this bike, Tjeerd, my friend, for letting me borrow this bike, trusting me with your baby. And I guess that just about does it. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, please like, because I'm trying to take YouTube as seriously as possible, producing the best content I can. And that would just really help me out a lot and just motivate me to keep on going. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.